Hello, everybody. What is up, Liz Parrish?
Hey
Ken.
Curtis,
Hi, hi, hi. Well, everybody in the chat, how are you doing? What's up, Thomas, Heidi, Chris, Caroline? Can you all hear me in the chat? Go ahead and give me a yes or a thumbs up or whatever makes the most sense for you. Angela, representing Georgia, United Way, Caroline, and Heidi. Yes, we can hear you both. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Liz, how you feeling?
feeling good, Curtis.
Yeah, Monday's an odd place to have a free webinar training on a Monday. That's who came up with that schedule.
I'm not sure. I think it was
No,
you.
no. Yeah, it's very, very possible. There's a lot of moving parts these days, so we got to fit it in where we can fit it in. Right now, we are streaming on X through the Speak for MC channel, Cape Conversations YouTube. Cape Conversations YouTube channel is focused primarily on advocating for foster adoptive systems. The Speak for MC channel on Facebook and YouTube as well. And then if you registered for this conversation, this casual conversation with Liz and myself, you can join us in the chat. If you see the chat on the screen, those are the individuals that RSVP'd. Please be active in the chat. Ask questions, share your feedback. The reason we're doing this is strictly to help give people tools and information to spark discussions that get people involved in the system, or if they're already in the system, help them navigate it and be successful. This is no, and I know it's hard for people to believe, Liz, but we're not doing this to sell anything. We're not doing this because we want to point the finger and say these people are bad and all these things are wrong. We are genuinely doing this just to help. Can you imagine? That is the only agenda, huh, Liz?
Listen, free information given by experience.
Yes. And to have real conversations as well. Like there is no agenda here. Let's just have a real honest conversation to see where this goes. I have some slides that'll help drive the conversation. But obviously, we just want to see where it goes, talking with Liz and then you as well. While we're about to get started, if you're in the chat, tell us why you're here. Why spend your lunch with Liz and I talking about the foster care system? You know, there's a lot of different reasons you might, but I'd be interested to know why you specifically are here to be a part of that. Liz, while we're doing that, do you want to give people a little background of you, why you're doing this with me, your experience in the system, and all that good stuff, and that might drive some conversation as well?
Sure. First, let me just tell you a little bit about me. I have a bachelor's in psychology. By no means did I ever think that I would be doing child welfare. I started in mental health back in 2003, moved to the state of Florida, and had a career in child welfare for about 20 years now. And so a lot of people are always asking questions. They're trying to understand the system because it's just a very hard system to navigate sometimes. And at the end of the day, we're talking about kids, right? So they're the most important people that some of us are just responsible for. And we want to just know how to make things better, to move them through the system, to teach them how to heal, and or get them to a place where they need to be, right? Some of our kids are in independent living. They're aging out of the system. So what does that look like? So really, I'm just here just to provide information, answer some questions, and Curtis, giving these kids some final time in their system and get them out, because really they deserve to be with families, with people that care about them. So
Agreed. Agreed. Yeah. So Liz and I met when my wife and I were going through the adoption process uh, on our own. And part of that process is you meet a lot of different people. And Liz was one of the individuals working on the adoption side, very knowledgeable. And what I appreciated about Liz too is that she understood the line between this being a real personal and emotional experience, but then also the okay, what is in the best interest of the child, and what are the processes to get there, and what information do you need to make sure we're going in the direction that makes the best choice for all parties involved. And our journey continued after Liz left, but then once our adoption journey was finished, Liz and I stayed connected, and then eventually just had a random conversation about, all right, what can we do to get some knowledge and share our experiences with others? And we kicked around the idea of doing a podcast. And that is very much on the horizon. But before diving fully into a podcast on navigating the system, we said, why don't we just do a initial webinar and see what the interest is and see what the conversation looks like. And then from that, decide what direction to go as it relates to the podcast to help better support people in the foster care system. And just some feedback here. Liz, Angela says it's complex. Our work centers around youth involved in systems. Our goal is to include more youth from vulnerable spaces. And then Melody, I work with families and would like to be more knowledgeable regarding the fostering process. So let's jump into it. Liz, what do you think?
Sure. Let's go ahead. Let's get started.
Let's get started. All right, let me get there we go. All right, look at those amazing people on the screen. Okay. Just for some context first, of kind of how we got to the slides that you're going to see. My company, Speak for Motivating Change. I do a lot of training and speaking across the country. And recently I was the keynote speaker for Florida FAPA, which is one of the largest organizations for foster parents in Florida. And after the keynote, I did a workshop where we had just about 15 to 20 foster parents in the room. And the plan wasn't originally to go in this direction, but it just happened organically. Is we started talking about, all right, if you are trying to advocate for some children that you're either attempting to adopt or foster, or you're a caseworker who has to, testify at court, what is the strongest way to communicate in a way that increases the likelihood that you'll get your point across, that you'll actually get your message across? Because Liz, we know it's one thing to have something to say. It's another thing to frame it in a way that people actually hear it and want to do something with it. So because of that, we started talking about, all right, what does that look like? What does that look like as far as navigating those conversations? And before we get to this, Liz, can you speak a little bit, because our perspectives are different, right? I was coming at it from a adoptive parent on these calls, trying to figure out the best way to advocate and navigate those conversations. And then you were coming from it from the adoption side. Some of these calls you were leading, other times you were speaking in court. How much of the let's talk foster process for a second, is advocating and adding value to those meetings? How much of that is part of the role they're in? Talk to me a little bit more about the communication side.
So, Curtis, I think the first thing that's very important is building the relationship with the people that you work with, right? So whether you're fostering or whether you're adopting, you're building relationship with those families. You're understanding where they're coming from and how they want to advocate for the kids that they have in care. So let's talk about, how do we do that? First and foremost, I think those that are working in the system, so your case managers that are supposed to be helping you drive the case, should be the ones advocating for the kids in best interest. So I understand, as adults, we may think, hey, we think that this is the way that the case should go, right? I don't know how many times you and I had those conversations too, hey, Liz, how come this can't move this way? Why are we doing things this way? And it's because just the way that the law is written, the way that the system is moving, we have to be careful on how we move, and we have to move in a certain manner. And so I think it's very important for your case managers to build that relationship with those families, to go ahead and to be able to advocate for the kids in the most appropriate way. But as foster parents, as adoptive parents, you guys also have the ability in meetings, in court hearings, the judges do listen. You just have to be able to know and understand on, the most appropriate way to move. And us case managers should be coaching you on how to do that.
Would it be fair to say, Liz, that the way we communicate on those meetings or how we present ourselves or our message impacts how it's going to be received, whether it be on a staffing or in court?
Absolutely. I think too, it's, taking a step back, making sure that, again, who is the most important person that we're talking about when we're advocating? It's the kids that are in our care. So we need to be able to really focus that the reason why we think that certain things should happen is because of the children that we have in our care. Now, understanding too, again, Curtis, that we understand that as adults, we think that things should be a certain way, but really focusing on the kids and what is in their best interest.
Mm. Yeah, I think that I have flashbacks as you're talking because I feel like we had so many of these conversations through the whatever 3 years process, and it's a very real thing because if we're speaking from the foster parent side, they are with those children more than anyone else currently in their lives, right? So it's very natural to say, I know, well, you don't know. Whereas you, on your perspective, you're right there with the systems and the procedures and the statutes, and you're not only viewing that child as just that one case, you're viewing all of your cases holistically. So then your perspective is different. So then the idea is how can we collaborate and build that connection with those two different perspectives? And I imagine there's a lot of patience that has to be had there. Respect comes into a play.
Yeah.
Let's talk about this for a little bit. So the very first thing I wanted to, so this is one of my favorite concepts. Obviously, with your background in psychology, Liz, so that's my background as well. And just in general, and what I talk about with my company is one of my pet peeves is when we collaborate in a way or communicate in a way that does not get us one step closer to our goal. In other words, I say I want this thing so bad, but I'm not setting the stage to get me closer to the thing I want. And some of that might be because what you're talking about with ego and frustration and the emotional component. So I wanted to share when you're maybe going to speak at court, when you are connecting and collaborating with your adoption team or your caseworkers for the first time, or your guardian ad litem, that how you present yourself early on does matter a lot, especially with how often they're going to receive your message. So I want to share this first concept. Imagine yourself going to court, or you're at one of your first staffings and you're communicating. There's this little thing called the halo effect. And what this means is the first impression that you make with someone, the soon communications after that are all going to be filtered through that initial halo. So in other words, if the first time you and I meet, Liz, and I'm a prospective foster parent or adoptive parent, the amount of respect, knowledge, empathy I have when communicating with you will then frame how you receive my request moving forward. So if I am someone who's willing to listen, who is seeing both sides of it, then when I send that follow-up email to request documentation or requesting to speak, or even if I'm escalating something, that's going to be filtered through this initial positive impression. Whereas in contrast, if one of the first, and you could tell me if this happens sometimes, Liz, if one of our first early interactions with you, I'm very frustrated. I'm demanding answers. When you don't respond to me in a timely manner, I'm escalating that to your supervisor. I'm texting you at all times in the morning. When if I'm communicating things in a way, it's a lot of I. This is what needs to happen. Then, as we proceed through that case, the initial all my other requests or the things I'm going to be communicating to you will be somewhat filtered through that impression as well. So when anytime I'm giving someone some feedback on initially speaking and making positive impressions, it's taking into account those early interactions, because even if it's not conscious, that person is going to frame you very early on in who you are. And then for them to walk back that initial impression is going to take a lot of time. So I say all that to say is, if we're really not buttoned up with how we're communicating early, you're going to be creating more work for yourself that you'll have to resolve before that open communication can occur. Liz, how often do you see people communicating in a way that actually makes it harder for them to get the answers they want? And then what does that look like when they do that? Just kind of give us a peek behind the curtain from your perspective on how that might impact collaborating and getting information and getting things done.
So, Curtis, I think that sometimes, especially prior to it coming to adoption, that, foster parents or other individuals, non-relatives, are communicating with case managers providing, probably ineffective communication, right? Information that's not necessarily accurate when it comes to adoption, just because that is not what they do. And so it's kind of like we're piggybacking off of them and having to provide, more honest answers or honest conversation. And so sometimes it can be extremely difficult, especially when we have an idea that something in particular is going to happen, and this is how it's going to happen, and it's going to take this amount of time, and we've been waiting for this amount of time, and then it doesn't happen. And as you know, the system works on their own timeline sometimes. Yeah. We can want things to move quickly, but sometimes that's not what happens, and there's all different reasons as to why that happens. Let's take, for example, you and I and Kristen, and how we, communicated. I could tell you, like, I can remember when we did our adoption interview. I can remember the conversations that we had, but also they were honest conversations. I think, you had an understanding, as I explained those things, of what was going to happen and how it was going to happen. And you were like, okay, I can work with that, that's the process. But I think it can just be very difficult when we start, just having that ineffective communication, that we want things to be a certain way, or we're demanding things, or we're going above our case managers. And sometimes it's just a learning curve, because, our case managers, some of them are really new. Sometimes, a whole agency of case managers can be relatively new, just because, it's that revolving door sometimes. It's a really hard job, and people come in and out.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'll tell you, when I used to be a case manager, when we would get from time to time a family that was just right off the bat, hey, I just want to be involved. I'm here to help. I'm here to listen. I know I don't know everything. I'm just interested in making sure that we can help my kids. Like that is just such a breath of fresh air that I was just naturally more inclined to say, okay, let me give these messages, their emails, just more attention. And that's not to say I'm purposefully giving more here than there. It's just, you naturally are going to gravitate towards conversations and people that don't drain your energy. And that's what we're just, the foster care system is all, and any helping system really is already so draining for the people that work in it, because they're pouring so much emotionally, where they still have their own emotional stuff they're going through at the same time, that you don't want to contribute to it being so, their cup's so full that it'll get to a point, if that gets the case, it's not even that they're attempting to ignore your emails. They're just not seeing them as clear as they can because they're just so overwhelmed and full. So you want to try to lessen that, not to be soft or be passive, but to create a communication that encourages the likelihood that they'll actually hear you. And on that effect, too, one other thing I wanted to share about this when we're delivering our messages and communicating is this thing called the spotlight effect. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think this concept was even more magnified over the last 10 years because of social media. And this is essentially meaning we are the center of our own world. We are the main character in our own movie. And the fact is, you are the main character in your own movie because you are with you all of the time, right? So it's just you. The problem with that, when we start to frame ourselves as being the main character in our own movie all the time, we think the world revolves around our situation in our particular case. Now, here's the dilemma. When it's your case and your situation, the world does revolve around it, your world. But every other case has a different situation where their world is revolving around them. And then it's the caseworker's job and those individuals in the system is to try to navigate all of those different perspectives. So I say all that to say is when you are communicating, when you are advocating for your case, try to have at the same time some empathy that even though this message is the most important message in the world to you, that person is also responsible for hearing the message of, however, let's say you got 30 people on your case, the message that's most important to them. And their own main character in their own movie as well, and what they have going on in their responsibilities. So this is where I really believe empathy comes into play, Liz, is you're able to say, okay, this is my case is so important to me, and the answer to my question is so important to me, but I'm also saying it's not the most important thing to them. So if I'm trying to convince them that this thing should be just as important to them as it is for me, that can create a little bit of defensiveness. It can make it seem like the person is just, I don't want to say self-centered, but it might come off the wrong way, as opposed to saying, hey, I know you have a lot on your plate. You got tons of cases. When you have an opportunity, I would love to just pick your brain about the situation we're going through here, and kind of opening up the dialogue, understanding that this person has their own main characters they're navigating as well. Initial thoughts on that one, Liz?
Absolutely. I mean, I think it is very important, especially if you want to get your message across, to make time and to be able to set some time aside to have those conversations, even if it's just a phone call or if you feel like it's necessary to have a meeting. If just things really are not getting done, I think it's just very important to have that line of communication, understand where your case is going. And just going back a little bit about, having that empathy, but also knowing that, we may be working towards your case, and then maybe it's a little bit of a fall off because, there's 15 other cases or 30 other cases that case managers are working towards. But what really has seemed to help is, I've always had a group of foster parents that were all about problem solving. Hey, so what can we do to help you? Oh, you've got some kids that came in. What can we do, or how can we help you take some of that off your load? And so that has actually been extremely helpful as well.
Agreed. So let's, in the spirit of that, I just wanted to, again, just intro the spotlight effect and the halo effect. Just remember, the way you communicate matters. Is it strategic? Does it have empathy? And does it get you one step closer to your goal? So with that being said, let's go to our first question here, Liz. This is from Amy. She is interested in some strategies for managing expectations for foster parents regarding children who are or will exhibit behaviors rooted in their trauma. We talk a lot about being trauma informed, but somehow it seems to get lost by the time a child is placed with the family. Yeah. So it's one thing to sit in a trauma informed care workshop. It's another in real time to be in a situation where the child might be having an incident or the behaviors are really escalating. Can we? How do you, Liz, help parents, foster, adoptive, even maybe case workers, new staff coming to the field? How do you help them manage expectations on, all right, what, let's really talk about what a child in care is going through and what that means for behavior. And no matter how skilled you might think you are at de escalation, what can still happen? What does that look like when you're trying to manage those expectations with parents?
Curtis, I think it's very important too to understand that every one of us, even as adults and children, all internalize what has happened to them, all that trauma differently, right? So that can look so many different ways, 1,000 different ways. I don't think I've ever seen anything happen the same way twice. But with that being said, yes, I think that, sometimes foster parents do forget sometimes after they've gone through the classes, we've done all the training, even as case managers, we've gone through the training. And when we're put in real time situations, we kind of forget a little bit because it's not something that necessarily happens right away. What I would do is that I know the company that I worked for and the area that I worked in, prior to children being placed, they would kind of do like almost like a meet and greet, but not necessarily with a kid, more so with the team. And it's very important to be honest, because if we are providing information that is not necessarily honest to the foster parent, you just put them in a really bad spot, in a really bad situation, and we can make a situation 10 times worse. So really just being honest of what this individual child would need, and what, the expectations would be. And but also, if a child is placed, it's we are still providing them with some counseling. Again, I understand that we have large caseloads, and so sometimes it's really difficult to get to everybody, right, and to have conversations all the time. But really putting some time aside, that if a foster parent appears to be in crisis, to give them those 10 or 15 minutes to talk them down. Like, hey, listen, I understand that things are bad right now, so let's go ahead and let's discuss what were the actions that took place. Okay, so let's go ahead and discuss how the trauma worked into these behaviors and what does this look like. And let's have conversations with the kids, because guess what? The kids know better than anybody else. If we're involving them in conversations of what happened, then we're able to get past on what it is that took place, what triggered them. Okay, so we know what your triggers are. Let's work on some of those coping skills. But it's really, as case managers, to help coach these foster parents. Be real, be honest. We're all here for the same reason. They're here because they want to help these kids. They are not here for any other reason. They're not getting paid. Let's just be honest too about that. They are getting a foster care rate. But that money really is to take care of the kids. They're not making any money off of this. And so their intention is really to take care of these kids. And we really need to start having some honest conversation with them about trauma and what that looks like. And providing them with some tools to overcome what it is that's going on.
How do you think that the desire to place a high risk youth, does that sometimes get in the way with the authenticity or realness that is happening with the foster parent? In other words, if a placement needs to happen really quick, are they not fully keeping it real? Like, hey, let me tell you the real about Johnny. Do you find some of that kind of gets swept under the rug, or like how does that look sometimes?
Absolutely. I think that, sometimes when you have a child or a teen that has high needs, that, our case managers are sitting in the office with them until placement is found. And I think it just becomes really overwhelming and really difficult. And sometimes case managers are like the first place that says yes, like, we're moving, we got to go. But I think that that sometimes is the reason why we're putting kids in placements that may not necessarily be appropriate for that particular placement. And that is not in one area, that's not one particular state, that happens everywhere. Of course, the rules are a little bit different, right? However, the needs of the kids are still the same in different areas. The needs are higher. There's not enough placements. There's not enough foster parents. There's not enough group homes, whatever it is that these kids need. And so I think a lot of case managers sometimes is like, I need a break. I can't be in the office with them anymore. First placement that comes available, that is what we're doing. So I think that's like a setup for everybody.
So in that situation, does the responsibility, for lack of a better word, fall a little bit on the parent as well to say, all right, hold on, let's slow down for a second. I have questions. I want to help. We are open to the placement, but before we can say green light, I have questions. And maybe if they do have that process, is it a matter of texting the questions? Is it a matter of putting them all in one email and sending them, jumping on a call and talking through them? Because I imagine, in my experience and in talking to other parents, we also want to have a documentation trail. Documentation is everything. So how should a parent navigate that part of it if there's just, we need a decision right now, we're on a call with other people? How should they navigate? Okay, I'm with you, but I need these specific questions answered. What's the best way to get those answers?
So, Curtis, I think in most situations, and I know in a few different states that I've worked in, there are assessments and things that have been completed on kids. And I would definitely ask to be able to review, like, has there been a psychological assessment? I think the state of Florida does CBHAs. Those are your initial assessments that have been completed. Am I able to review those? And from there, do I have questions? One, when was the last assessment completed? Was it 12 plus months ago? Because what's happening now? Anything over 12 months, to me, that's old. I need some updated and new information. And then ask the right questions. So, hey, I need to know, currently, do we have a mental health diagnosis? Do we, is the client or the child on medication? What are the behaviors like? Can you tell me what it looks like? Do we have any coping skills? Is there anything that helps them de-escalate themselves? Are they able to de-escalate themselves? We also want to know what the plan is. What is the reunification plan? Is it reunification, or is there another goal that we're looking at? So are we looking at more of a long-term placement? Are we looking for a shorter-term placement? What does that look like? And I'm sure, based on the information that they receive, they may have some additional questions, but those would be my initial ones. Just what does it look like? What was the trauma like? Understanding the reason as to why they came into care, because I feel like that makes a huge difference. If we know the reason why they came into care, it's not to pull at our heartstrings, right? It's to understand really what it is that they went through. What does that look like? And how do I fill their cup?
Yes. And it reminds me of a situation I heard. It wasn't in Florida, it was another state, but the house the children came from, one of their punishments when they didn't listen is they were just locked outside and forced to be outside for hours at a time. No food, no drink. They're just, you have to stay outside in the backyard. So then when they were moved to a foster placement, the foster placement knew of like some of the trauma, but didn't know that specific type of punishment. So then when the child wasn't behaving, they said, you know what, no TV, you're going outside, you have to play outside, not understanding the background of that. And then what happened is the agency actually came down on the foster parent, saying that you are punishing this child in a way that could potentially trigger them, considering their previous trauma, when it was actually unknowing that that was a punishment that that child had that would trigger them. Because like your normal, it's like, no, you're going playing outside today. Someone might not even think that that could potentially be connected to something real for that child. So I say all that to say is, what are the best type of questions to ask? You're not going to be able to find out everything, but are there like 2 or 3 questions that are the, hey, you have, if you're going to be working with a child that has had some trauma, and if they're in the system, there's some sort of trauma there. What are there like 3 go-to questions that you should ask before collaborating or helping or working with that child that has to do on the trauma side?
Well, absolutely, Curtis. Again, understanding the reason why they came into care, making sure that they give that information. Though that information is actually included in a lot of the assessments that are completed, because the provider doing those assessments are asking case managers for that information. So that should already be listed within the assessment. I think it's important too, like if you're taking a child into care, ask for the documentation. You want to ask for those court documents. Your licensing worker, as foster parents, are coming to your house. I think once a month, once every 2 months. But they should be looking through that book, that blue book that you have for your kids, making sure that you have all the documentation and things like that that you need. Especially important is medical. A lot of the clients coming into care that are coming into the system, they're behind on their medical needs, their dental needs. And so making sure that you have that information to be able to provide them with those services. And then my other thing too is, as far as, mental health, regardless if a child comes into care and you're saying, oh, they're resilient, they're handling the situation really well, I would really ask for them to be in counseling if they're already not in counseling. Medication may not be necessary, but at least get them into counseling, let them see a counselor, and let a counselor decide, like, hey, they seem to be mentally stable. We've been having weekly appointments for the last 90 days. I think that we're good. Come back to us, if other issues arise. But making sure that you have all that documentation. And again, I go back to, why are we here? If we're looking for another placement because the child broke their last placement, I want to know the why. Why are we here? What are the behaviors and the concerns that the last previous foster parents had or group home had that they weren't able to maintain the child in their home? And so what really does that look like?
Yeah.
Give me the option if I'm able to maintain a child in my home versus saying, hey, you have an available bed. Let me go ahead and place this child in your home.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And I think, hold on, let me see. I just got another. Sorry about that. So I think the other thing is that I'm understanding there are no bad questions, just bad answers. And to be truly curious and put your ego aside when asking those questions. Because the example that I shared with the young man being put outside is that he was going to a placement of parents that have been foster parents for like 15, 20 years. So they had this natural inclination like, oh, I got it. The other place couldn't handle it. We can handle it. And then that level of lack of a better word, ego, then prevented them from asking some of those more in-depth questions. So
Right.
even, and I could speak personally that happened to us when I first joined this system, because my background, I worked with youth involved in foster care, and then I worked with at-risk youth. So then I knew how to navigate those systems by running programs. So then when I got involved here, I'm like, no worries, I'm good. I know, yeah, I know what the deal is. And then that, because of that type of mindset, I didn't ask enough questions on the front end where I wish I would have. So if you do get a placement, or you are having a youth come to your home, ask, even if you think you know the answer, ask the questions anyways to get yourself as much information on the front end and put you in the best position to help that young person. I got a question here. Let me go ahead and put it on the screen. If we would just want to do a really quick breakdown, Liz, I'll spotlight it. What is the difference between foster care, guardianship, and adoption? So can we quickly just break down those three? And I know we have people here that are across the country, and Natalie is in South Africa, or from South Africa. We'll speak in general, but then also, knowing where our background is in Florida, because this might differ from state to state a little bit. So talk to us a little bit, Liz, the difference between foster care, being a guardian, and then actually being an adoptive placement or an adoptive parent.
So, I mean, really simple, Curtis. I think that foster care is your temporary solution. It's a child comes into care, they need a place, a safe and stable environment to be in. And that is your foster care system more than likely. And that's only when relatives or non-relatives can't be identified at the time of removal. You have guardianship. I know the state of Florida does guardianship where I forgot what they call it. But it's again, it's still temporary. Your case can go ahead and close out. But sometimes it makes it a little bit more difficult to reopen the case, because it's supposed to be like permanent guardianship. It's supposed to be, you may not want to adopt. The parents may not be doing what they're supposed to do, but you don't really want to adopt. And that's okay. And so it can still close out, and you can, traditionally live a normal life, right? Do the normal things without court involvement constantly. And then adoption is your permanent solution. When you have parents that are, trying to work towards a case plan or not working towards a case plan, sometimes the court sees fit to dissolve parental rights, and the children become available for adoption. But that's final. They can't come back after that.
Gotcha. Okay, so foster, if you're fostering, ultimately the goal is reunification. It's a temporary placement until the child can go back to the bio. Guardianship would that be sometimes be like a relative, a neighbor, someone like that?
It could be. It definitely could be. Yep.
And then adoption is obviously that child is on track to exit the system and be adopted by a forever family. On that note, I got another question from individuals that registered, and they want to know, and I'll go ahead and put this on the screen too, is what is the process for foster to adoption? What is the process for foster to adoption? I'll just go ahead and copy and paste that in the screen, and excuse my typo there, my spelling.
You're fine. So, I mean, it all depends, because there's two different scenarios that I think that could take place. Scenario number one, you have a child in your home, the child becomes available for adoption, and you would like to adopt. And so the agency should be working with you potentially towards that goal, depending if we have any other siblings. Is the agency looking to place all the siblings together, and is there a family that could take all of the siblings? And so that's also really important to think about when you're fostering, you're navigating through all this. Or, is there another relative or non-relative out there that's been out there that has requested placement? Because again, I think when we're talking about, our wants and our desires, again, looking at how we're advocating for the child in our home. And this is where sometimes, Curtis, I think that, case managers and adoptive parents or foster parents can kind of butt heads a little bit because you have two different opinions, right? You're coming from two different areas. But also, foster parents can also decide we've been fostering. This is nice, but we also want to go ahead and add to our home. And so they're talking with their agency on how they're able to go ahead and that they're able to be part of that adoption pool. So that way they can be considered for a child that may be available.
What and this might be going off topic a little bit, but I'm looking through some of these questions. What do you say for people who are just angry at the system and say, hey, there are a lot of things that this system needs to do better, and it's not. And yeah, Liz, that's nice. You're telling me, hey, we should be collaborative and we should communicate effectively. And Curtis keeps saying, yeah, empathy this, empathy that. But I tried all that and it didn't work. What is the process for, or what should they do next? Or what do we say to those either people who are no longer dealing with the system because they gave up on it, or they're currently in it and they're about to just throw their hands up and say it is what it is? What would be your message for them?
Oh gosh, how many times did I tell you, Curtis, be patient? It's okay. Be patient. Let's talk it out. Like, let's take the high road. I think too, you know, I feel like when we were having our conversations and, you understanding a little bit about the system too, it's, we have to make change. Change has to happen. Obviously there's a lot of flaws, but there's ways to go ahead and to go about that, because it's not my fault that the law is written the way that it is. It's not your fault that things are not moving the way that anybody would like. But there are ways that we can go ahead and we can definitely make a difference. I know you're working towards some things to really make some actual change. And your motto, for every problem there's a solution, right? And what does that look like? And sometimes you have to collaborate on what that is, or you really need to do your research.
Yeah, for every it's how the universe works. For every problem, there has to be a solution. That's the very nature of a problem. It's so balanced, but it's hard to think that way. And my feedback on that question as well is, you cannot control the response someone else decides to give to you. You can only control what you're doing. And I know it's very easier said than done, and it's somewhat cliche. It's like in a fortune cookie or something, but it is true. So if you are not getting your answer, stay committed to getting your answer. Potentially change up your approach. Try to have some empathy and be curious about what's going on. I can't tell you how many times maybe I was trying to get an answer, and then when I wasn't getting it, it wasn't because the person was ignoring me. It's because I was asking the wrong person. They weren't even there. They were like on leave or something, and they didn't have an away message on, right? And I'm like, oh, how disrespect. And then I call and get a hold of someone else, and it's like, oh no, this person's actually been gone for like 3 weeks. Like, oh, okay, well that would have been nice to know, but you know what I mean? Right. The idea is, if it's not working, you pivot, be adaptable, but stay consistent to communicate in a way that's going to get you your answer. Because just naturally, the more defensive you make someone, the more closed-minded they're going to be, and they're going to be less likely to hear you. But stay committed, stay persistent, but also, to Liz's point, be patient. That the answer you're getting might not be the answer you want, and that's just how it works sometimes, So then pivot back to what you can control. Liz, can we do a little? I can't believe it's almost 1 o'clock already. This is insane.
Right.
We didn't even get through all of our slides. I only got through 2 slides, so we might have to do a part 2 here. But what I do want to do is a rapid fire with you of questions that we got when people registered. I asked people to when they registered to put questions in. So I just want to copy and paste, put these on the screen, and let's just try to knock these out as quickly as we can. If you're cool with that.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Let's go. So we'll start with this one. This is a common one. How long does the foster to adoption process usually? And just for the audience, for those watching, these rapid fire, we're giving general answers of what is ideal, it should happen. Not, it's not going to apply to everyone's situation. So generally, Liz, how long should the foster to adoption process usually take?
So Florida statute says,
okay.
Florida statute says that a child should not be in care longer than 12 months. Okay. Once the child is available for adoption, it should take no longer than 90 days. That's what Florida statute says. That's the rule of thumb that we should be going by. That is not what happens because there's a whole bunch of different issues, but that's what Florida statute says.
Yes. And I believe the last report I look like, the adoption placement report that is published by DCF, I think the number was 14 months. And this was just from when the child is TPR to adoption. Their data said 14 months. So, you know, I imagine it varies from situation to situation. And because some of the things, Liz, that could cause it to go longer, there could be competing people saying they want to adopt, could be one situation. I imagine if during the 90 days, some things arise that the agency wants to really have buttoned up before adoption is finalized. Is that another one? Well, what are some other reasons that things could be delayed a little bit?
It could be that people are having second thoughts. And so they want some additional services in the home before they decide to go ahead and move forward. It could be that you have an appeal that has taken place. One of the parents have appealed. The appeal alone can take up to 12 months for you to be able to get a response back from your appellate court. It could be competing families. It could be a whole number of you could have to go to the adoption, the ARC, you know, where the Department of Children and Family and your lead agency makes a decision of whether or not you can move forward or not, depending if there's something in your background. So it could be a whole list of things. And just
we'll do a whole nother webinar on the ARC process. How about that?
We need to.
Yeah. For sure. All right, I got another one here. I imagine I know the answer to this one, but what information should I document and keep record of?
Everything.
Yes, I figured that'd be your answer.
Everything, emails, everything. And you know, as foster parents, they have the right to have, you know, those documents that are in the file as it pertains to the child. You don't have the right to have it as it pertains to the parent, but to the child. So medical records, court documentation, those type of things. You're eligible for all those, and I would be asking for those.
Yeah, I co-sign that, every single thing. And then also try to document in a way that is as objective and neutral as possible. Because if you're writing it where it's just purely looks like you're coming at it from a specific agenda, they're just not going to take it into account or give it as much credibility. So try to write it like you're observing the situation happening from a neutral party, where you're, you know, documenting a staffing or a visit or whatever it is. Try to have the tone be as neutral as possible. What about this one, Liz? What should foster parents do if they don't feel supported or if they feel unsupported?
I think it goes back to having those conversations, but even requesting a staffing with the right individual. So if you feel like you're not getting it from your case manager, you can definitely ask your licensing agency, like, hey, I would really like to have a conversation because I just feel like I'm not being heard. and see what they say, but definitely try to have those conversations, because your licensing people are the people there that are advocating for you. They're going to get you what you need if you haven't gotten it already. But really asking for staffing and be like, can we sit down and can we have this conversation? But then again, going back to our point, Curtis, just, when we're having those conversations, we're advocating for the child and not necessarily what our needs are.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so just understanding not to come from, that aspect.
This was a good one too, Liz, because this was something I did not understand when I first got into the journey here. Is who are all the people involved in a child's case? So, like our situation, I think we obviously had the agency in our county. We had an agency in another county, and then we had another agency in another county. And then also, then you have the licensing agency, you have the adoption agency, and you have the guardian ad litem. So those are six parties involved in our situation that just comes to mind. Traditionally, how many people? Oh, no, we didn't even. Our situation didn't have bio, but you might also have the bio in place, obviously, if you're working towards reunification. So just generally, how many people could be involved in a case that the foster parent is going to have to be collaborating with?
Sure. So you're going to have the case manager, the guardian ad litem. You also have your licensing if you're a licensed foster parent. You're also probably going to have to collaborate with the attorney on the case, because you didn't mention any of those, Curtis.
I didn't
You
mention those. Yep.
You had the attorneys, and there's not one attorney, there's two, because there's one for the guardian ad litem and there's one for the department. So I think I'm up to five so far. And then if you have the parents, mom and dad, that's 6, 7. And sometimes you may even have, a grandma that comes out, or an auntie. So you have the biological family really, as well, depending on what that situation looks like. But that's already up to 9. But really, you have to look at it like a village, because it's a village of where, that's going to help get you where you need to go, where the child needs to be, whether that's a reunification or whether that's another permanent option. So you really need to look at them as your village.
Yeah, agreed. And shout out to the guardian ad litem. There's some rock stars, and their primary role, Liz, is to kind of be the one of the main advocates for the child, right? They're representing the child and the child only, and participate in communicating with people like yourself, and then at court as well. And you said they have their own attorney too.
That is correct. So they're the advocate for the child. I kind of call them sometimes the mediator, because they're just trying to also try to help get everybody on board. And it's the same thing, because the way that we communicate with the guardian ad litem, as well as how the guardian ad litem communicates with us, depends on, how the system is really going to work and really work good together. So I think in your case, the guardian ad litem and case management worked, extremely well together in order to try to move things along as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Let's do two more. I'm at 12:58. I think this was an interesting one as well. I remember the very first court hearing that we attended. Obviously, I speak for a living as part of my company, but I was never more nervous than ever than speaking at a hearing. Like if you could, maybe from the outside you can tell, but on the inside I was just, and one of the mistakes I made, I remember at one of the hearings, is I wanted to give feedback to something else I was hearing, and I stood up in court, and the judge goes, "Sit down." Like, okay, so this is not that type of situation. So what should someone expect who's going to speak at a court hearing? And maybe you can tell us from the perspective of like a caseworker, or that might be speaking for the first time, and then a foster or adoptive parent.
First of all, anytime you go into the court with a judge, you have to go in with some confidence and you definitely have to know what you're talking about. So you have to plan it in your head a little bit like, hey, these are the questions that I may be asked, making sure I have the answers to. But that also goes back to case management, knowing your case like the back of your hands. Okay. But definitely walking into the courtroom, depending on what kind of court hearing it is, depends if you have the opportunity to speak or not.
Mm,
Okay. So if this is one of the first court hearings where it could be a shelter hearing, you may not have the opportunity to speak. The only people that would be speaking, probably more than likely, is a lot of the attorneys, because that is, believe it or not, that's what they get paid to do, is to speak for you, unless the judge is asking you some additional questions. If it's some type of adjudicating hearing, you may also not be speaking in court, because that is just, a time where they are receiving their case plan. The court isn't asking you any questions. They don't want to hear anything. They may just ask you, how's the kid doing?
mm.
And as long as everything is good and you don't need anything, you keep it moving. But your judicial reviews, when the court is going over the cases and they are asking you for the last 3 to 6 months, how has this kid been doing in your home? Is there anything that they need? What does their school look like? Also, that's very important in the state of Florida. Child needs to be in school, attending school, and what does that look like? And or medical behavioral needs and things like that. Those are the things that they want to know. If there are things that the court can do in order to get you what it is that you need for your child, then that is definitely a place where you're going to advocate for some of those things. But don't go into the courtroom asking for those things when you haven't already asked the agency for those items.
Mm.
Okay. I think that is some of the biggest mistakes that we do, that we wait until court, because it's almost like an I gotcha. And we definitely don't want that. Again, it goes back to our previous conversations of working together and working together as a team, but definitely just having those conversations prior to court. Now, you can go to court and you can tell us, hey, this is the conversation we're going to have. Absolutely, all day, have that conversation with the court if they allow you to be heard. But your reviews are the ones where the court is really going to hear you, really going to listen to you, and you'll have an opportunity to speak. I think in some of your situation, Curtis, too, a lot of the court hearings were in regards to placement. And so, again, depending who your judge is and knowing the judge that you have is really going to play a role if you're able to speak and advocate. But you really need to be comfortable. Because going in front of the judge, I think about it as talking to an old friend. Let's go
Mm.
ahead, let's be a little bit comfortable, let's tell them what it is that we know. But really wording the things where it counts, where it's genuine advocacy.
I like that. Awesome, Liz. Well, we are at 102. The time went super fast. Like I said, we didn't even get a chance to, we went through 2 of 12 slides. So, but this was good. I'm thinking, Liz, the next one, and maybe we'll talk about this offline as a series, but maybe the next one we just start out with the idea of, okay, I'm considering either adopting, fostering, or applying to work in the system. What should I know first, or what happens next? And maybe we just do a conversation specific to that first initial.
Sure.
All right, I'm going to get in, and then the next one. Now I'm in. What in the world is okay?
Did I get myself into?
Yeah, what is happening here, right? And then the other one is the back end. All right, now I've got my footing, but either now I want to move towards adoption, or now I'm considering if there's other ways to get involved, and we'll have that conversation as well. But either way, Liz, I would love to do another one of these. I truly appreciate your time today.
Absolutely, Curtis. And thank you so much, because I know we've been talking for this for a while. And I'm so happy that we did it today. And I can't wait until next time.
Absolutely. And if people do have any follow-up questions for you, Liz, or want to reach out, is there a best way to find you, whether it's email or social media or anything like that?
Yeah. Social media, I'm all over Facebook, But I can definitely go ahead if you want to. I don't know if you're able to go ahead and just put my email up.
Yeah, if you just write it in the comments, it'll go right in there.
Do I see comments here? I don't think I do.
Might not be on your end. Go ahead and give it to me, and I'll type it in for you.
Sure. So let's use Subaru, Subaru.
Subaru
02
02
at AOL.com. And
at
don't
AOL.
judge, that is really how old I am.
AOL. Oh my goodness. You still got the dial-up connection, Liz? It takes 5 minutes to get on.
That just went away, by the way. Wasn't it
yeah?
just a few months ago? Yes, the dial-up connection just went away just a few months ago.
You're showing your age that you know that went away. So that means
AOL.
that you did have it. Awesome. Everybody, I appreciate you joining me on a Monday at 12. There is no doubt that the system we're talking about is extremely complex and nuanced. And there's a lot of things that we can do to get involved. And there's a lot of areas of the system that can continue to evolve and get better. And we're hoping that some of these conversations drive us forward. So stay connected to Liz and stay connected to me, speakformc.com. So you are alerted as soon as we have another one, because we are going to do another one. Yeah, thank you, Melody. Thank you, Caroline. Appreciate y'all. And then at the end of this stream, I do have a video where I talk about helping some one part of the system that's extremely important to me. If you could stick around another 3 minutes or so, watch that, throw your comments and get your feedback. Liz, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
No, I just appreciate everybody coming to hear us out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz. We will be back soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Imagine you're on a plane and the oxygen masks come down, but despite that, the plane lands safely. Wouldn't we still want accountability to find out why the oxygen mask came down? It's the same thing with our adoption journey. Hey viewers, it's Curtis Campogni, founder of Speak for MC and Cape Conversations. You might have noticed the stream looks a little different today. That's because right now, as you're watching this, I'm at the Boys and Girls Club in Pinellas County, dropping off donations that our kids gave as a way of paying it forward. Being part of the Florida and adoption system in Florida gave our family so much. So this is one way we can give back. But if you know anything about me, I think there's a more impactful way we can give back. And that's with contributing to solutions that can inspire real change. So today I want to talk with you about something that may or may not be tracked. It's called a contested adoption. This is when multiple agency workers, relatives, or caregivers dispute who should adopt a child after the parental rights have been terminated. This means the child is available for adoption, looking for a forever home, but there are multiple opinions on where that child should be placed. These contested placements lead to filings, additional hearings, court appearances, bureaucratic delays while the child just sits in limbo waiting for their forever family. In some cases, the child stays right where they are, already in school, bonding with family and friends. In other cases, the child gets removed from that situation and placed in a new one. And according to the 2024 Adoption Incentive Report, the average length of time that a child is in the system post-TPR can be upwards of 13 months. But here's the real issue. Is 13 months the standard time? Is 13 months reasonable? Is 13 months just what it needs to be, considering all the pieces that have to come together for a child to be adopted? Well, here's the issue. We don't know. All of the public data that I find shows removal to TPR, TPR to adoption, and total length of stay. It also shows total number of adoptions finalized and the total number of children eligible for adoption during that fiscal year. So the good news is it does show the length of stay in months from last removal to termination of parental rights and termination of parental rights to adoption. This means we have a number where we can then say, all right, how do we get this number down? 13 and a half months. Is that too long? But here's the issue. That 13 and a half months, we don't know how many contested adoptions contributed to that final number. We don't know the nuance behind that 13 and a half months. Is that number because multiple caregivers wanted to adopt a child and it took time to figure out where that child's forever home should be? Is that number because of bureaucratic delays with the Adoption Application Review Committee? Is that number because there was a relative in play that did not know that that child was going to be eligible for adoption, found out late, and then expressed interest? Is that number because that child had specific needs that they could not find an appropriate caregiver to match them with? Is that number because a different caregiver came out of the woodwork to express interest who previously said they did not have an interest in said child? Is that number because your staff, who primarily handle adoptions and home studies, were on vacation or medical leave? I can go on with the potential reasons for a delay. And I can even accept that the majority of these delays were justifiable. But my dilemma is I cannot find any data that points me in a direction where I can start helping with a solution. That's why I need you right now. I need you to go to speakformc.com and visit our CAPE Conversations page. On that page, you will find a very important poll. A poll that just asks you one question. Should Florida publicly track how often adoptions are contested once a child is up for adoption? All I need you to check is yes, no, or not sure. After you answer the question, you put your first name. If you want to put your last name in your email, you can, and that's optional. But your response gives us credibility and a path forward. This isn't about pointing fingers. This is about bringing visibility to the parts of our journey that happen in the dark. Imagine you're on a plane and the oxygen mask come down. But despite that, the plane lands safely. Wouldn't we still want accountability to find out why the oxygen mask came down? It's the same thing with our adoption journey. We want to find out if there were errors along the way that could have been prevented and shorten the length of stay that child was in limbo prior to having their forever home. If there's any population that should require adults to learn from their mistakes, it's children in the foster care system. Thank you for watching this stream. Thank you for taking the poll. And thank you for looking in the mirror and asking, what can we do better? Our kids deserve it. Our kids deserve heroes. So let's put on our capes and make it happen. I'll see you next week.